Hello, this is Gwenda Joyce, the Art Ambassador, host of the Art Ambassador radio show, where we bring art into the conversation. And if you have been following the radio show, you know that I led an Art Ambassador tour last week to the thriving city of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. Toronto was a fantastic destination for many reasons, some of which are known, some are unknown. We had a great time. We visited all the major shows going on there, including the Art of Banksy. Banksy, the street artist who has been able to remain anonymous, although he's been making art and putting it out into the public for over 20 years. The show was curated by Stephen Lazaridis, Banksy's agent and photographer. And my guests today on the show are Corey Ross, who is the president of Starvox Exhibits, which brought the show to Toronto, and the publicist Danielle Iversen. We're going to be finding out about the Art of Banksy show and why Toronto. Why was it brought to Toronto? Toronto may not be your favorite go-to city, but it has a lot to offer. As we found out, we went all day long, all into the evening, and explored the art scene that is there. There's a full range of activities, from world-class museums to galleries that I had gotten to know when I was going to Art Basel in Miami Beach during Art Fair Week. Many of the top galleries from that city show up there. And it made me curious, what's happening in Toronto? Now, Toronto as a city has drawn attention on the map because it is one of the top cities being considered by Amazon for HQ2. It's a very livable city, and it has a wealth of tech industry workers to draw from, and plenty of room to grow. It's a wide open city with lots of open space, even though people, like in all cities, complain about the traffic. It's also a cultural center for the middle of Canada. It extends down into, draws people from all over the Midwest and the U.S., and it's the fifth largest city in all of North America. So it has a lot to offer, a lot going on. And one of the things that I liked best about being in Toronto was its sense of its diversity, its inclusiveness. People have come from all over the world to live and work in Toronto, and they kept telling me that they came from other countries, from Asia, from Latin America, from Europe, and they all felt like they were welcomed and included and were invited to settle in and make a living and make their way in the city of Toronto and in Canada. And it just has that wonderful openness that extends into the cultural outlook. Now, I want to get started by introducing my guests today. They are involved with bringing the Art of Banksy, a major exhibition of Banksy's art, to Toronto. And I'd first like to welcome Danielle Iversen to the show. Hello, Danielle. Thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having us on today for the Art of Banksy.
The Art of Banksy, what a cool exhibit that was. It's in an old, basically unused building that needs to be repurposed, and what better place to show art, especially the street art of Banksy, than at this building at 213 Richmond. Tell me about the show.
It's actually 213 Sterling.
Sterling.
Road, and it's an amazing place. Yes, Sterling Road, and it's right in between. It's in the Triangle Junction. Really artsy neighborhood. You know, they've got the Drake Commissary there. You can go there and have drinks. There's a lot of neat beer places that are opening up there with brewed, right from Ontario beer. We've got soon Mocha will be opening there. The art gallery. I'm sure you heard about that. So the Art of Banksy, we brought it there. Corey Ross from Starvox exhibit, sorry, and Michelle Borgema from Live Nation. They brought, their forces together and brought us this amazing show, North American premiere on June 13th. And I'm the publicist. We launched it in Toronto. It was unbelievable. How many people wanted to see it and come see it. It's a great, great show. And I know you saw it. We spoke on the phone, you and I, and you loved it.
I loved it. Everyone in my group loved it. We all felt that we really learned a lot about Banksy, and so much of what Banksy is all about is rumor and innuendo and gossip. And I felt like we got the straight scoop there by going in and seeing the art and listening to the videos that Steve Lazaridis put together, talking about his experience with Banksy, how his relationship evolved. It was so amazing, and it was just a perfect building to be in. Tell us how it's, first of all, when we were there, I saw all these balloons hanging up near the top of the ceiling. These are red balloons with Banksy written on them, and I know they were left over from some big party. Where did those come from? What kind of celebrations did you have going on?
Well, we had the opening night, of course, on June 12th, and then we launched it to the public on the 13th. But we've had so many different groups come in that want to have a party at this amazing space. It's an old warehouse space. Corey Ross found it. You'll be speaking to him in a minute. He's the president, as I told you, and he just has this knack for, getting the right spots for all of his productions that he does, whether it's theater or art. And we found this space with the tallest ceilings, as you know, and we built the gallery right in it. So people go there and they just think, it's an art show or it's an art exhibit or a gallery. We have the AGO in Toronto, as you and I spoke about, and the ROM, and those are beautiful buildings too. But we actually built our own art exhibit, our own, venue ourselves. And Corey Ross and Michelle from Live Nation, they did an amazing job. And we brought in these 80 original works that are unbelievable from Banksy. It's not street art, it's actual works from the lenders that we got the pieces of art lent from.
And those pieces of art, Danielle, were prints. They were screen prints that Banksy had printed, sculptures, and some of the prints on canvas that he created. There's a really interesting story that Steve tells about how the Banksy got started making prints. He started by doing screen prints of using some of the stencils that he had used to create images on the walls. And he was selling them in the beginning for just 25 quid. That's 25 pounds. And so they were just, they weren't numbered. They were not cataloged or anything. He was just selling them. And so a lot of people were able to buy them, for that really small amount of money. And you had a lot of examples of those there. Yeah, you had a lot of examples of those. Yeah.
And as you asked me about the red balloons, basically the red balloon it's the girl, the most famous piece of art. And they're up at, when they're all helium. So that's why they're up there. And we've had a lot of different events, and we have a lot of kids that want the balloon, and just anyone, families come, husbands and wives come. Dates come. We've got kids that come, and even little babies that want to see this exhibit, and everyone loves it.
It is really accessible, and we're going to be talking more about the Art of Banksy, which is in its last week at 213 Sterling Road in Toronto, in an old repurposed building just for this show. It's been up all summer, and it's down to its last few days. I'm here talking with some of the main people involved in bringing that show to Toronto. Stay with us. We're going to be talking more about the Art of Banksy. This is Gwenda Joyce. I'm your host of the Art Ambassador Radio Show on BBM Global Network. Welcome back to the Art Ambassador Radio Show. Today, I have guests who are responsible for bringing the Art of Banksy to Toronto. We've been speaking with Danielle Iversen, the publicist, and I'd like to welcome Corey Ross to the show. Corey is the president of Starbucks Exhibits, which brought the show to Toronto. Welcome, Corey. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here today, Gwenda.
Well, this is a really exciting show. As you may know, I did have a chance to visit the show last week when I was in Toronto, leading a group of art lovers to your wonderful city. It was a real treat to learn so much about the Art of Banksy and Banksy himself, curated by Steve Lazaridis, who was his longtime agent and originally a photographer. So, Corey, tell us the story of how you got started and involved in bringing the Art of Banksy to Toronto.
Well, it's an interesting story. The exhibit started in Amsterdam, and I went with my family, and I have a daughter who at the time was 12 years old, and we went through the exhibit, and after we were done, I found that we spent the entire afternoon talking about Banksy and this mysterious man that he is, and the political messages in his art, and do you agree with this one, or do you disagree with that one, and what do you think this one meant? And so I realized that if it was a fantastic afternoon for me and my daughter, that it would be a fantastic date night, it would be a fantastic family outing, and it's so unique in how the work that Banksy does provokes conversation, and it was so different than, we saw incredible art in Amsterdam. Of course, there's the Van Gogh Museum and a number of other things to see, but this was the one that we spent the afternoon talking about. And so I left, and I thought that was really cool, and I wonder if it'll ever come to Toronto, if it ever travels, or what happens with it. And roughly 6 months later, I got a call from Live Nation. A colleague of mine over there said, listen, we control the rights to this show, The Art of Banksy. We're not quite sure what to do with it. We're thinking of going to Greece with it, to Athens. We're thinking of going to Stockholm with it. But we kind of would like to try something in North America. Do you have any ideas? And so I immediately made the pitch for Toronto, and the art scene that we have in Toronto, and the incredible audience that we have for exhibits in Toronto, and then right down to the neighborhood that we chose, which I know you and Danielle were discussing a few minutes ago. But what you didn't touch on was that this raw warehouse space that we transformed into an exhibit actually is a former factory. And it was a factory for munitions. So it was Canada's weapons from World War I and World War II were built in this building. And so for us to transform a weapons manufacturing facility into an exhibit that touches on the politics and peace the way that Banksy's work does, made it the perfect location for us. And that's really how we won the rights to the exhibit, and that's how it came to North America instead of to Europe.
I love that story because it's really true that that kind of transformation occurs from the ground up. And as a munitions factory being turned into a place that shows Banksy's art, which is really quite political. And he had very strong ideas about how he wanted his art to be shown and how he wanted it to be accessible. And he's continued to be anonymous to this day, I think also because he didn't want his personality to interfere with the art. He has a very strong sense that the art should stand on its own, and that if you're an artist, what you want to do is have people see your art. You don't want it to be about you or about the price of the art. You want it to be about the art itself and the message. And his message is very political in directly attacking and exposing many political issues. One of his favorite topics is the police. Another is the military. And a third is consumerism. One of my favorite pieces is an image of people standing in line to go to a stand where they can buy T-shirts, and the T-shirt that they're buying that's on sale is "Destroy Capitalism." I mean, there's so many layers of irony there, and just as you were talking about.
Yeah, it really is what I love about him. He kind of has these three things. So first of all, the graphics and the images are so, like, they're catchy. They're so clear and wonderful to look at. And then the second layer is there's always a political message of some type that you decipher from it. But the third is that there's this comedy. It's like thoroughly tongue in cheek. throughout, all of, or at least most of the art. And so you go through an exhibit and you're looking at it and you kind of have a chuckle and you kind of have a message and you kind of have a visual experience. And all of that together, I think, is what's magical about Banksy.
I think you're absolutely right. And I might even add, thinking that you and your daughter had a chance to talk about this, that and I don't know how old your daughter is, but there's a human element, a kind of a warm human element of including people of all ages, young, middle-aged, older, people with that sense that we all live and share in this world together. And there are some great images that Banksy makes, drawing on elderly people. And I had some older art lovers in my group, and they were just as they enjoyed this show just as much as anyone else. And I don't feel like, I think anyone really feels like they're being targeted. They feel like they're being included when you're seeing Banksy's work, and that was really eye-opening to me. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing for me to spend days standing in the gallery and observing the audience. It kind of almost ebbed and flowed during the day. With different people coming through. I mean, the first thing in the morning when we'd open at 10 in the morning, it would be lined up mums with babies. So they'd all it would be the stroller crowd. And I was always joking, well, they were probably up from 4 in the morning, so this is mid-afternoon in their time zone. And then, further into the day, we had a lot of seniors come through who would be available during the day. And then right after work, we'd have this very young date night kind of crowd come out. And so it seemed to have this wide spectrum. On weekends, we'd had families and kids. And you mentioned the balloons. I mean, it was all those kids letting go of balloons. Is really why the ceiling of the gallery is lined with balloons.
Well, it really is a wonderful show. And we're going to take a short break right now. And we'll be talking more with Corey Ross, who brought the Art of Banksy to Toronto for everyone to enjoy. This is Gwenda Joyce, host of the Art Ambassador radio show. Stay with us. We'll be right. Welcome back. We are back to the Art Ambassador radio show today on BBM Global Network. I'm your host, Gwenda Joyce, and I'm talking with Corey Ross and Danielle Iversen, who have been involved in the Art of Banksy exhibition that was brought to Toronto after having been exhibited in Amsterdam, and who knows, it may show up in your city in the future. Danielle, you had your own reactions to the kind of people who came and saw the exhibition.
Yes, it was unbelievable. We like Moses Neimer, he wants to come by this week. He hasn't seen it yet. He knows it's ending. And the reactions I had were they didn't expect what they saw. They said, we just thought it'd be a bunch of art sitting in some room. So people really love.
Yeah, I think it's really well set up as an exhibition. There are segments, and each segment has a video introduced by Stephen Lazaridis, who was the curator of the show. And Stephen gave the background. He started with his own experience, having been hired to photograph Banksy's work. They were both from the town of Bristol in England. And I'm sure that Banksy was not easy to photograph in those early years or ever, because he's a moving target. And he devised, Banksy realized that he could make images and paint them on the walls very quickly if he made and used stencils. So he cut out stencils and it was all ready to go, and then he would bring cans of paint, and just very quickly he could stop, pull out a stencil, paint the wall with a swath of color or maybe two, and then be gone before anyone knew he was there. And in the meantime, People were citing the fact that Banksy had been there because he had come and gone so quickly. I think that was part of the drama and the excitement of the story of his work. And so then as things evolved, Lazaridis got to know Banksy, and they decided to work together. And Lazaridis became Banksy's agent and put on some shows and some programs. Tell us about some of those early big events. There weren't too many, but there were some big events that were talked about in the show. Corey, what is one of the ones that's important to you?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's good that you point out this whole Steve Lazaridis layer that we have to this exhibit. So what's unique about the exhibit is that we have, not only do we have Banksy's art, which is posted on the walls, but the whole experience is informed and kind of covers the experience that Lazaridis had being part of Banksy's world. And so really that started in 1998 when Lazaridis was the photographer for an alternative paper in Bristol. And there was this unknown artist. Banksy wasn't famous by any means yet, but he was a graffiti artist about town, and Steve was assigned to go and photograph him. And so our exhibit begins with that photograph, which is a photograph actually of Banksy with a paper bag over his face, so you don't see his face. And because based on that encounter, Banksy decided that he liked Steve and liked the idea that Steve would become his official photographer. So we then have a room of the photographs that Steve was called upon by Banksy to take, and most of the purpose of Banksy asking Steve to be his photographer was, at the time, his art didn't stay on the street. It had no value at the time. He wasn't famous. He was doing these pieces. They would be immediately painted over by landlords or tagged by other graffiti artists or taken away by the police. So he would call Steve, and Steve would come out and photograph. And so in the exhibit, in this first room of the exhibit, we actually have photos that Steve took of Banksy. And sorry, his face is blurred, but you see Banksy applying the art. And it's fascinating to see that he does it in broad daylight often, in front of police often, and he has a variety of ways that he does that. But the main thing is, if you kind of wear an official-looking uniform and you're putting something on the street, often people don't notice or pay any attention to that. So then from there, when they started to need to make money, both for Banksy and his team to live and also to do some of the bigger shows and exhibits that they would do and installations that he would do over the years, they came up with the idea that they would sell art. And it started with, as you mentioned earlier, with just prints that were sold very inexpensively that are now worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then it slowly developed into shows. And at first, we have paintings. So we have a room full of prints. That's the first thing that you see once you move from the photographs. And those are the prints that he sold over the years. They're limited edition prints. But then the next room that we have is paintings, and it starts with original paintings that Banksy would sell at an annual Christmas party that Steve would organize. And then in 2003, they did a big exhibit in London, and we have a giant hanging, it's called the Flying Copper. So it's a flying policeman painting that we suspend from the ceiling. So we have one of those that's from that show in 2003, and then we have rooms of other pieces that Banksy did over the years. He's very famous for The Girl with the Red Balloon, and we have an original painting of The Girl with the Red Balloon. And he's also very famous for something called the Flower Thrower, which is a protester who, instead of throwing a rock or a Molotov cocktail, is throwing a bouquet of flowers. And Banksy's put this in a number of walls around the world, including on the wall in the West Bank, the wall between Israel and the Palestinians on the West Bank. And so we have several original versions of that painting.
This show in Toronto is totally original, filled with original works by Banksy, and we're going to learn more about the Art of Banksy on exhibit now through September 16th, closing this Sunday in Toronto. Stay with us. We have more to talk about the Art of Banksy with the people who brought it to Toronto. I'm Gwenda Joyce, your host of the Art Ambassador Radio Show. We'll be right back.
Yeah, okay.
We are back. This is the Art Ambassador Radio Show with your host, Gwenda Joyce, on BBM Global Network, and I am the organizer of the Art Ambassador Tours. Last week in Toronto, and a group of art visitors and I went to that wonderful city to explore the art scene. We had the opportunity to see the Art of Banksy, and I'm speaking with Corey Ross and Danielle Iversen, who were involved in getting that show to be exhibited and attended in Toronto. So my question for you, Danielle, is about the events that you put on during the Art of Banksy and brought many people to see it and enjoy it. What was one of your favorite events?
To life. I got people from years ago in Toronto and from all over the U.S. came in for this event. And that was, I have to say, the old school deal. It was really, really amazing. And Corey did a great job putting it on with us because he let us bring in the great, music and just the food and the drinks and everything, non-alcoholic beverages. It was amazing. But the fun one, I would say, was the PAX event, PAX. It's the whole cannabis industry. They booked a party because we have this beautiful space, and they just had the best time. They said they were here for a convention in Toronto, and everyone came, and they just loved the whole idea of having a party in the back of our space where Corey Ross, who's on the radio with us right now, he was like, we had couches and people were just so relaxed, had fun, and they could go walk through the exhibit at the same time. That was part of what we did. So they just said it was the best event they've been to in a long, long time. And I have to say I had a lot of fun meeting all these interesting people from all over the world, literally, and also all walks of life. Like, you'd have artsy people there and the lawyers, lawyers and bankers and artists, and there were musicians that came and actors. It was a real wide range, right, Corey?
Yeah, absolutely. We did a series of events. We did events for IBM employees, and we had several banks come through. Scotiabank came through and hosted VIP events. But certainly, I would say the most unique event we had was when we hosted the Toronto Marijuana Conference people from PAX. And that was it was certainly one heck of a party, and it was a very wide group of people, frankly, who are interested in that industry. So we had venture capitalists, and we had artists, we had farmers who are growing the product.
Farmers.
It was probably the widest swath of people.
Art is something that brings people together. I'm a former gallery owner, and one of the pleasures for me of owning a gallery and putting on shows was to have people come into the gallery from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, and you could tell that the art was what was the draw, and everyone had a chance in the art to relate to it in their own way, to bring themselves, to bring their stories to the art and then relate in whatever way you do to what you're seeing. And I think Banksy is one of the most successful artists to do that. He has a really wide audience, a huge audience, and people of all kinds love it. One of the things that Lazaridis says in his commentary in one of the videos is kind of talking about the art world and how he believes that Banksy is probably the best known artist in the world and one of the most accomplished, but he's not recognized in the museum world or in the official art world. So both, and that's a real phenomenon. It's a real important issue to discuss. And Corey and Danielle, as you saw people coming through, were there a lot of art world people there who were also engaged with the work? Do you have any sense of these kinds of things?
Yes, I do because. Go ahead, Corey.
I was going to say I don't know that we actually broke through that sort of glass ceiling for Banksy in Toronto. We've had over 100,000 people come to see the exhibit. And it's been, as we've described, it's been a wide, certainly a wide audience. But I can tell you that I haven't heard from the senior staff of the major museums in town. There's a modern museum of art that's the MoCA, which is supposed to be opening in late September on Sterling, across from where we were. Where we've been exhibiting, and I would have thought that they would have capitalized on the opportunity to somehow get involved with what we were doing and reach out to the people who are coming through the exhibit. And I still think that Banksy is a little bit alternative for the mainstream art world. And I think it's a shame. I think that they're missing out. I think but I do think it's part of what created an opportunity for us. I'm obviously, our company is in live theater and in concert business, and this is the first exhibition that we've ever done. If the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto had been a little bit more forward-thinking, or the Modern Museum of Art, or they probably could have grabbed this. But the ROM and the AGO did come, though. They did get a hold of. I did reach out to them. They did come, and they were very happy, and they were blown away by it, right, Corey? Some of them did come. Yeah, but they're still not exhibiting the work.
I know.
Yes, that's true, and there is plenty of room out there in the art world to, for alternatives. I will just mention my own reaction, which is that I was coming from the art world, the more established part of the art world, and I wanted to see the show. I was curious, and at the same time, I was a little bit cynical. And during the show, I was convinced. I really opened up. I learned a lot. My only personal access to actually seeing a Banksy was at one of the art fairs in Miami during Miami Art Week, and what I saw was a big wall. It was a concrete wall. It must have been 10 feet high by 16 feet wide, and it had Banksy images on it, painted on it. But not only were there the images, there was the whole wall, and it was on sale at a price of $120,000. And that kind of added to the cynicism for me. But seeing it in this presentation changed my view quite a bit. I'm really pleased to be able to talk about the Art of Banksy here with some of the organizers of the show in Toronto. I'm Gwenda Joyce, the host of the Art Ambassador radio show, and we have more to come. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is the Art Ambassador radio show. I'm your host, Gwenda Joyce, on BBM Global Network. And we are talking today with Corey Ross, the president of Starvox Exhibits, who brought the Art of Banksy exhibition to Toronto. And it's been such an amazing exhibit that it's been extended through this weekend and closing on Sunday. So, Corey, let's talk about the final piece in the show. The exhibit itself has a lot of Banksy's works, prints, and paintings, and even sculptures, but there's a final piece that's really, I think, the coup d'etat. Tell us about that big piece.
Sure. So the exhibit, we were speaking about this a little bit earlier, but the exhibit takes you through the time that Steve Lazaridis was working with Banksy and doing art shows for him. And the final, I suppose I should start in the second to final room, because we didn't touch on that. The second to final room, all of the art comes from the last show that Steve and Banksy did together, which was a show in L.A. called the Barely Legal Show. And by that point, there was Banksy fever, and movie stars were coming out and buying pieces. So all of the pieces in that room belong to some pretty famous people. But there's a large piece that's about 20 feet wide there, which is Banksy's take on the soldiers planting the flag in Iwo Jima. But you move out of that space where you've seen some of the most commercially known pieces that Banksy has, and we bring you into a room where you see this final piece, which is a piece that before we exhibited it in Toronto had only been seen by a few hundred people at an art show of street artists in Los Angeles that actually occurred right after Steve and Banksy stopped working together. Banksy was commissioned to make this piece, and it's 21 feet high, and it looks like a giant stained glass window. And then at the bottom of the stained glass window, you see this figure wearing a hooded sweatshirt, a hoodie, on his knees, praying in front of this stained glass window. And so that figure on his knees is a self-portrait of Banksy. And the stained glass window, when you start to look at it a little bit closer, it's made out of all sorts of messages and tags that say all sorts of different things. And where that came from was Banksy actually took these boards into schools in Los Angeles and got kids from the inner city schools in Los Angeles to tag this. And so it has all sorts of messages from the kids, and then he took that and he framed it in to make it look like a stained glass window and put his self-portrait at the bottom of it, and then it was displayed in this art gallery in Los Angeles, and then it was purchased by a collector who put it into a warehouse, and it hasn't been seen since. And the message of having the kids do the art, to my mind at least, is really it's this universal message that plays so well from Banksy, which says that anyone can be an artist and anyone can have their art put up in a museum. And if it's kids or if it's Banksy, an anonymous artist, it still has a place in the art world. And the size and the scope of this piece and the fact that it's really never been out before is what makes it kind of the ultimate moment for us in the exhibit.
It is a wonderful piece, and it has at first impression, you think that you're looking at is a stained glass window from a church because it's that convincing. And it's not until you get up close that and maybe even read the story around it, that you realize that these are street artists and that the drawings and the messages are tags that are another language that you might not even know or notice until you get up close. So it's really a comment in so many ways on the way we look at things, the way we see things, and then, of course, Banksy using his interest in showing us who we are, that he brings something as traditional as a stained glass window in this traditional, formal, cathedral-like architecture to present this image. It's one of the things that convinced me that Banksy really has a lot of merit. And I think it was an excellent way to end that show. I hope that this work, including that last piece, will have a chance to be exhibited more freely so that more of the public can see it. Corey, are there plans to travel this show? Are we going to be able to get to see more of Banksy in different places around the world, or is it just going back into the vault? Well,
it's interesting because as we mentioned earlier, all of the work in this exhibit belongs to collectors who over the years purchased this from Banksy as Steve was selling the art. So in order to make an exhibit like this happen, Steve went around and asked each of the collectors to lend art to us and allow us to exhibit it. So each of those individual lenders gets to decide really whether we get the art to go to another city or not. So I'm happy to say that the majority of them have had such a positive experience in Toronto that they have signed up for more cities. So we're in the middle of determining where those cities will be. But what I can tell you is that they will be somewhere in the United States, and in the next month we'll be making an announcement. So our website is BanksyExhibit.com, And so I suggest that everyone who's listening and is interested, can't make it this weekend, stay tuned and check out our site, and we'll be making some announcements very soon.
Well, that's great news. This has really been a wonderful treat to talk with people involved in bringing the Art of Banksy to Toronto and maybe to other places. We will stay tuned. Right now, we're going to take a short break and be back. This is Gwenda Joyce, the host of the Art Ambassador Radio Show. Welcome back. This is Gwenda Joyce, your host of the Art Ambassador Radio Show on BBM Global Network. And I'm here today with Danielle Iversen, who is the publicist of the Art of Banksy that has been showing in Toronto this summer. It's about to close. I saw the show last week as a result of taking a group of art lovers to this wonderful city of Toronto. There's so much going on there culturally. One of the things that Danielle has been involved in is TIFF. So Danielle, tell us what TIFF is and why that gets people out and about in Toronto.
The Toronto International Film Festival is celebrating, I can't believe it's 30 years. And it is so much fun. It's a real art experience, with film, real life stories, documentaries, and feature films, as you know. And it seems like every year it gets bigger and better. And I've been doing it for over 25 years. I raised money for them way back when I was on the Young Executive Committee, and I was a volunteer. And I really love film, and I've been in film all my life, working in the film industry. And I've done lots of neat movies with producers from all over the world, from, the U.S. and from Iceland and France and Europe. And I've also done a lot of, met so many interesting people. So right now that's what's going on here. It ends the same day as the Art of Banksy on September 16th. And it's a real buzz in the city, and great movies and everything. I think the winner of the movie, I can tell you, do you want me to tell you? It's going to be Green Book. It's called Green Book. It is unbelievable. I saw it last night at the Elgin Theater down at Yonge and Queen across from the Eaton Center. And it was a packed house, standing ovation, like standing 3 times, and unbelievable film about these 2 people. I'm not going to get into it because you have to go see this movie, but it's about, interaction with 2 people and how they just learn from each other. You'll see what I mean, but it was the best movie at the festival. And I was sitting with Hollywood Elsewhere, Jeffrey Wells, and he was saying this was a real uplifting film that he hasn't seen in many, many, many years. And he's a major film critic. So,
yeah. Well, the Toronto International Film Festival, also known as TIFF, is one of the ones that shows up at the end of a lot of films, those major alternative films, as having been the place that many first-run movies got their start. It's along with other things going on in Toronto, it's just a part of what makes the city a cultural mecca. There are some other things such as the AGO, which has been mentioned several times today. That's the Art Gallery of Ontario. It's a major museum. 10 years ago, it was remodeled by Frank Gehry, who actually grew up as a youngster and lived about 3 blocks away from where this gallery/museum, as we call it, in the U.S. So he was living very close by, so he had close roots to it, and he redesigned the building and made it even more impressive. One of the things that's just occurred in that gallery is that there's been a reinstallation of the Indigenous and Canadian collection of art. And the unique thing about this collection is that it's reinstalled thematically according to 4 major themes of art rather than chronologically. So it's very much of an integrated experience, really a pleasure to see and to enjoy. There's another wonderful museum called the Bata Shoe Museum that I invite everyone to go and enjoy in Toronto. These are all parts of what made our Art Ambassador tour last week to Toronto important and a chance to go behind the scenes to see things that you wouldn't normally see if you're just out looking at art. So I invite you, if you're interested, to sign up at Art Ambassador Tours and get on my list to be the first to be able to go with us on our next tour. This is Gwenda Joyce, the host of the Art Ambassador Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.